Morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, January 26, 2021. The time is 10:02 a.m. This is a special meeting with our auditor, specifically our finance director, Dina Darrow. I am officially calling this meeting to order. Joining us by conference phone, Commissioner Bill Brooks. In person, Commissioners Duncan and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. One and only business and potential action item. 2022 budget discussion, including processes and direction, and I do want to welcome everyone again. Thank you for your interest and participation. Take it away, Dina.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Commissioners, for setting up this meeting so that we can kick off the budget. Our goals for today will be to get some direction from you on how we should open the budget and key elements of the budget. We are going to do some process changes, hopefully to give us more insight into what's inside the B budget. And we will also be providing a very high-level 5-year outlook for capital to give you that needed context when you're making your decisions during the budget. So if anybody has any questions, I'll take those, and then otherwise I'll just dig right in.
Leslie, you okay? Yep. Bill, any questions for Dina?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Great. All right, so I will bring your attention to the document that I placed in front of you. There are also copies next to the agenda if anyone would like a copy. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm always happy to see people interested in the budget and showing up for our exciting meetings. So what I have up here is the A, B, and C budgets with some options. So depending on what the board's overarching priorities are, and I went ahead and penciled in Attorney Center because it seems like that's something that's probably going to happen, that's probably going to drive the decisions that you have before you today, at least to give us a starting point. So starting with the A budget, with the Attorney Center in mind, and are there any other projects, capital things that I should put up there as an overarching priority before we begin that the board has?
I can't think of any. I think the projects that Sean's been working on are nearing completion, so I think we're okay there.
They're already budgeted.
And they're already budgeted, so yeah, I think you're right, Dina. It's the new building.
New building. Okay, so we'll proceed with new building, and we'll say, okay, for A budget, new positions. What's the board's appetite for new positions?
I think that I know there's 1 or 2 positions that are going to be brought forth to be unfrozen. So I want to, if we're going to look at any new positions, I want to prioritize unfreezing positions first. And then I'm okay with new positions that are covered by restricted funds.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with new positions. At this point, I'm not prepared to say how many and how, because I really haven't seen anything from the department. So for me to respond, it would be premature.
So
but thawing existing first makes sense.
Okay. So we can tell the groups that if you have a need for a new position.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm watching you on TV, plus I'm following along on the computer here.
Yes.
New positions, yes or no, is way too simplistic for me. We need to take each request as it comes forward, and sometime, there's going to be, I'll guarantee you, a position or 2 or 3 this year that we haven't anticipated, that we really need, and we can't say, no, we said no. We need to be flexible as top management for the county and know when we need the new position and when we don't. So yes or no, that doesn't get it for me.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Okay, keep going. Thank you.
So does the board have an appetite for any kind of employee increases? COLA, steps? Do you want to keep it flat? Are you going to entertain overtime increases? This is just to give the groups a starting number.
Yeah, COLA, again, this is going to take us back to the CPI, and this is the discussion you and I just had. Which CPI are we going to use? If we're going to go COLA, I think we have to go with the local CPI. We have real estate prices up 15% year over year. You cannot judge Kootenai County, for the most part, against the rest of the country, even though most of the country is experiencing somewhat of a boom, but I think ours is even greater.
And we have to do COLA without using it as an excuse to just blanket up wages. As you say, Chris, we have to discuss what COLA we're using and why and how much that would be. Otherwise, all the hard work we've done to raise people up to market levels kind of falls apart when you fall behind that quickly because of our current conditions in this county.
Right. Good point. Leslie, any thoughts? Okay. Steps, is that where you wanted to go next, Dina?
Sure. So steps in the general pay plan, steps in the matrix. Is the board going to look at those?
Okay, is Sylvia here? Oh, Sylvia's not here. She was going to do some work for a general pay plan matrix. Do you have any idea where that stands?
I don't, but I can just put in a placeholder that that's something that the board would want to see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they're working on it. I just don't know where it is in the process. Unless somebody else does, help me out, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So with that, I'm guessing that flat is not
Yeah, I don't know.
something we're going to actually have, a discussion about wages.
Correct.
Overtime. So in the past, we've rolled back overtime to whatever was in the prior year, but not any additional. So a lot of the base overtime is years and years old because they're positions that come forward every year, and then people ask for increases. So is that a practice you want to continue, or do you want to reset all of overtime to zero and have departments look at their overtime individually and then bring forward what they would like to have for overtime based on what they're seeing for needs?
When we, to your first point, when we budget on an annual basis and we budget the overtime, are we doing it based on the approved for the prior year or the actual? Which do we typically use?
Neither, actually. What happens is you have this base overtime amount, and that gets put into the budget as a placeholder, just like any other position. But if there was any addition to that overtime in the prior year, that goes away. It rolls back to that original base amount. So say you had a $5,000 overtime 5 years ago, and
Okay.
every year you ask for an extra $1,000. So $6,000 would be your amended budget. Every year when we start the budget, it rolls back to that $5,000.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
okay.
we could completely roll it back to zero, or we could just leave it how we're doing it now. It rolls back to that prior year, whenever that overtime position was created. Many departments, they just leave that placeholder in there for overtime, and it's usually enough.
Okay.
But it's just a preference for the board, what you would like to do. We can do business as usual. We could roll it back to zero.
Zero.
I think I'd like each department to really take a hard look and see going forward what they're truly going to
Yeah,
need.
Precisely.
It's 20
I think that's very important. I think zero, the acknowledgement that we will have overtime, we will, especially if we're asking
That's correct.
departments to do more with less. We have more people, more services to provide, and we're not approving a lot of positions, so we're going to have some overtime. The question is, does the overtime save us money as opposed to hiring a person to do that job and provide those services? So I'd like to bring it down to zero with the departments knowing that they need to tell
Right.
us why they need what they need or what they anticipate, and then we go from there.
All right,
Okay.
great.
Keep going.
Okay, so B budget. So we've talked about zero-based. I think I said in a previous meeting, without clear performance measures, zero-based just creates a lot of work for people. So last year, we did a 2% just across the board. We could do something like that again. We could open flat. There's been talk in our budget idea group about maybe zero-basing some components of it. One of the natural ones to zero-base would be non-capital, since our capital threshold is now $10,000 instead of $5,000. So there'll be a lot more going into that non-capital line item.
Okay.
So if you would like the groups to start with a zero-based non-capital, we can start that at zero and have the groups populate what their non-capital needs are up to 9,999 items so that those start fresh.
Otherwise, we can go flat.
Otherwise, we can just go flat. And we can do a combination. We can go flat with every other line item, and we can go zero with non-capital if you want.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I think some of the operating stuff I'm not that concerned with, but some of the one-time purchases that were approved last year, I want to make sure those don't roll forward.
Many of those are sitting in that non-capital item, which is why it came up.
Okay.
Bill?
So, Bill?
I'm in favor of this year, and Leslie has talked to this point a couple times. People are hurting out here in Kootenai County. And for us to do anything other than flat, we're going to have to work awfully hard on each and every budget area and each and every line item. There's no simple answer this year. So I would go flat, and that's not to say we're not going to find money that we need to spend, but to start there and go from there and work it hard.
Okay, so then are you okay with Dina's suggestion that we go zero base on the non-capital items and flat with everything
Yes.
else? Okay.
Yes, I just don't want to do what we did last year and just across the board add 2%.
Got it.
I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Leslie, you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, great. All right, so capital. So we know the new building is on the table. There are other items down here as far as what sorts of things are you willing to look at as groups bring forward requests for capital items? Are there certain capital items that are off the table? Are there certain capital items that you're fine with entertaining, such as software, IT investments, building and grounds maintenance schedule as presented, if there's other building projects, vehicles, those sorts of things? So what would you like the groups to do as far as bringing forward requests?
For me, I would like zero building projects unless it was already started, in previous years.
So no new.
Right,
No new. I would definitely like to look at vehicles because we have some, they're just breaking down. They're just falling apart, and we can't really conduct business if we don't have vehicles.
Makes sense.
IT, I think that I would like them to look at what is helping us be more efficient and continue with those items. Like on base, I think needs to be continued because from what I'm learning about it, that is going to save a ton of time. And then building and grounds, we have to keep up on the 5-year plan.
Yep. And back to the IT investments, that's going to tie hand in hand with people working from home.
Okay.
Because if we don't have the necessary information technology, if we don't have the necessary IT infrastructure, it's going to be very difficult. Bill, thoughts?
I agree with everything that's been said. One thing I would note, I do not like IT spending being called investments. That's always when people want to spend more of the taxpayers' money. It's an expense. It's a cost.
Okay.
Just call it what it is, and we'll live with that. It's okay. But IT investments can get real expensive, and we have a great IT department. But let's review these things. And some of that software is very, very expensive.
Okay.
All right. So as far as fleet management, I know that there was a group that put in a lot of time on using the fleet management process to keep us in rotating vehicles. Do you want fleet management to be the overarching principle for replacing vehicles?
I would like that, but I'm willing to revisit it if there's clogs.
Okay.
Because I can't have somebody waiting for 6 months for a vehicle when they need it now. So if fleet management can facilitate going through vehicles and figuring out, right now we have a couple departments that do it really well. So I don't want to, prevent them from continuing to work well, but I also want to bring more people on board so we can make it holistic instead of piece here, piece there.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I want to see fleet management being the first choice. And there are going to be exceptions, of course. David Callahan last year had a vehicle with wheels falling off. I mean, if we get to that point and fleet management can't solve the problem, we've got to find a vehicle with wheels.
Right.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Bill?
Yep, I agree. We need vehicles with wheels.
Awesome.
Well, Cadillac's coming out with a flying vehicle. You think we could use? Oh my God! Can you imagine the accidents?
Okay.
Anyway. Okay.
Very fun. Thanks for keeping it fun, by the way. So, new programs.
Yes.
Is that something that the board wants to have folks bring forward, or are we kind of dialing back on any new programs?
I'm willing to look at self-funded programs.
Yeah.
All right.
You wouldn't include the matrix in that, would you? The pay matrix as a new
No.
okay.
So new programs are like, say, for example, the district court started their collection process program, where they are implementing new software and hired an employee to help start chasing down uncollected amounts, that sort of thing. So that's a new program. Soft Code was a new program for civil a couple years ago. So that kind of stuff, where it's a new service, it's a new operational kind of thing.
Got it. Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
As far as tax funded or self-funded, it's got to be funded. And new programs, you never know what you're going to get. Life's like a box of chocolates, and last year we never would have imagined what we have had to spend on COVID. And fortunately, we had some assistance there. So I'm not going to refuse to look at any one particular tax or self-funded. I'm going to take them as they come, but give them a real hard look.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So to the fun stuff, revenue.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have several funding sources. As far as tax goes, how does the board want us to open the budget? Do we want to open it at what we anticipate to be 3%, 3% plus new growth, any other tax sources? What's our starting point? We can always change.
Why don't you, can you take a moment and just explain for everyone's benefit what just came out with the tax committee? By the way, folks, this is a proposal coming out of the legislature's tax committee. This is not, they haven't voted, the full House hasn't voted, let alone the Senate, but I'm going to have Dina comment so that you understand what might be confronting us going
And
ahead.
my understanding is it's in committee. It's been printed. It's in committee. So it has
committee?
not made it out of committee.
Right.
And I'm being on the list to testify in committee
Okay.
on that.
Okay. So my understanding after reading what I've read is that normally the county can look back 3 years and can take up to 3% of the prior years or whatever the greatest amount was in the last 3 years of property tax, multiply that by 3%, and that's considered the 3% cap for property tax increase for that year. And then in addition to that, the county can also take new growth, which is any property that's been brought into service with occupancy where you build a house and you start living in it halfway through the year, that halfway through the year where you're living in the house, that is considered new growth. So the assessor gives us a preliminary number in March and then a final number in July. Last year, what was it, 1.3, something like that? We do anticipate
Yes.
a URD closing down, so that could give us more than that, but we don't have the numbers from the assessor yet. So those are normally our two tax sources. Whatever we don't take of that would go into foregone taxes. Right now, our foregone
Balance is a little over
balance
10.
is 10,603,737.
603.
So, given that knowledge, what would you like us to start with?
I would like to start with new growth and 0% tax increase. Because if they are going to cap us, chances are our new growth alone is going to get us pretty close to the cap.
Which is looking like 4%.
Which is looking like 4%. What's interesting with that, and you and I went over this briefly, is if you look at the 1.3 million in new growth that we took for this current fiscal year 21 against a tax base of, where are we, 50 million that we raised, or 51 that we're raising, something to that effect?
51-ish.
51-ish.
So quick math, 1.3 on 51 is what? That's about 2.5%, roughly. So if we got 2.5% from new growth, and we are capped at a total of 4%, then that says we can only take 1.5 in taxation.
Right.
And that's probably what I would go with, because we're going to have to fund operations. So there you have it. I mean, we're pretty much already, what's the right term, locked or capped. If that passes, we don't know.
So,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm looking at the screen here, new growth / URD return.
Yes.
Now, is that URD return separated from new growth?
no. So if we're capped, we wouldn't get to recapture that. We would be capped at 4%.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with what Chris said, although I think I differ a little bit. I will not vote for anything having to do with foregone taxes.
Oh, no, we didn't get there yet.
To me, that's a slush fund.
Okay.
No, I know, but I'm looking at the totality of revenue here. I'm okay. I mean, I know we can do 3%, and we did it not last budget cycle, but the budget cycle before, and people didn't like it, but that's what we needed to do to charge to get the services to the people that they want.
You know what's interesting?
So I'm not shy of 3.
What's interesting in this whole analysis is, if you look at the URD return, and by that, for everyone's benefit, are these urban renewal districts that are closing this year. It's anticipated that we're going to see something around 3.5 mil. If that's true, that takes us almost all the way to the 4% limit. So whatever else we can raise via taxation or another source is about 0.5%, if I'm right. And recent discussions with Lori Thomas, it's looking like 3.5 mil. So they're doing a job on us.
Yeah. Well, and if they use the CPI, and depending upon what CPI they use,
CPI, right.
if that could cut us back down to maybe 2% max.
Okay.
So it's, if we're going to do debt service for a building, it's not going to give us a whole lot left over to run everything else.
So do you have answers for us? Are you okay? Dina?
At this point in time, we don't know. So to open the budget, what I'm hearing is 0% plus new growth. Our new growth could be up to 4%. So do we want to just start with 4%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it may happen with a minimum of taxation, the way
Right.
it's looking.
And if we're allowed to take new growth and 3% later, then we can discuss that.
Depending on what happens.
Because we don't necessarily have to spend it. If we're allowed to take our taxing authority, we can stuff that away in fund balance if we want to hold off on building the building and wait until KEC is open and ready for business. You could potentially accumulate some cash to build the building
Except we
3
have no
years.
room for the judges, that's the problem.
So,
Anyway,
okay, so I'll pencil us in for 4% max.
Yep.
So then, I'm assuming that you are in agreement with your colleague on foregone?
I am, and I would still say, 0% taxes.
Okay. All right. So other revenue sources, if our revenues are capped, we're gonna have to find other ways to fund our operations. So I know that several departments are looking at raising fees if they haven't been raised in a while. We also have a lot of contracts with, Sheriff's Office has been looking at their contracts because there's a lot of agreements with cities and the tribe and other organizations that we provide services to that haven't been updated in, 5, 8, 10 years. So they're looking at those as well. So is the board in favor of the departments digging in and looking at their fees?
I would say especially if fees haven't been raised in 3 years.
yeah. In fact, we just went.
Well, and
Go ahead, Bill.
go ahead.
No, go.
I am particularly interested in raising fees for things like out-of-state voting. I think they should go from whatever they're at to about $500 a year to help cover the expenses that we. No, I'm not being.
No, I know, I'm good, go ahead.
And that we need to start covering these fees and not providing a big lake for the folks of Washington and specifically Spokane. If they want to come over here, it's going to cost you.
All right.
And in fact, we did that. We did agree to raise the fees for, for waterways.
How much did we raise it? How much did we raise it?
I don't know, we doubled it, didn't we? On some of the fees?
Yeah, it was
And there were some
minimal.
new fees too.
And we also, and we went up a fair amount with community development as well, because the analysis that David Callahan and his group performed with your help was that the fees that we were charging had no rational basis.
Right.
So this time we went to
Right.
the actual cost, and we were severely undercharging, so we decided to increase those.
All right. So what about new fees? Would you like the groups to look at statute and see if there's anything we're not charging for that we could be charging for?
Yes.
Especially if it's costing us to provide the service and we're not charging enough or at all, we need to have a fee for it.
All right. So I'm assuming contracts, yes, look at contracts.
Yes.
And then as far as new sources go, I know that right now the law says that we can't charge tourism tax because of our size. I don't know about any kind of like sales tax, like a local sales tax, that kind of stuff. If we find that our property taxation gets curtailed, I'm hoping that the state's going to offer us other ways to run the county.
IAC has a letter going out, and I've signed on to it. I'm not sure if any of the other commissioners here have, but it talks about other ways to raise rather than cutting our taxation. It's ways to save taxpayer money by fixing some other things, and the local option is one of them. But I don't know if anybody will carry that, so we'll have to find out.
It does relieve pressure on the property taxpayers, and when talking to the legislature, I mean, if we're concerned about property taxpayers bearing the burden, then this is the relief valve.
I agree, but in the past, legislatures looked at that as that locals are going to misuse the funds. So,
Alrighty then.
yeah.
So I also just put some stuff down here, just for ideas. This is more just for noodling and for the departments to noodle. I will distribute this to the groups with your preferences so that they can get started once we kick off in the system. Been reading a lot about best practices with our Government Finance Officers Association. One of the things that Nancy Pluft helped us with, and we're in testing right now, is creating an access database that pulls data off of our financial system and allows groups to go in and really dig into their B budget and see what those line items contain. So we're going to be promoting that through forms that actually connect to that database. So the person can go in, they can put in what's in that line item, they can run a report and see what they've spent, the vendors that they've paid for that particular line item, all the way down to the detail through a link into this database. And then that database will kick out all of those entries, and the auditor's office can load that into New World. So the users won't have to go into New World until their data's already there, so they can do their work in this database. The other piece of this, and this is for the benefit not only of the groups, for you as well, I'm going to be sending out pieces of this to the groups. This is a 5-year outlook forecast of capital needs that the groups see at a very high level that they'll be needing. So when you start looking at requests for 2022, you can see, okay, this group is asking for a car this year, but it looks like they're probably going to need a car every year. So I've heat mapped some of these to look at vehicles, to look at other things with service lives in mind. And the groups will be filling these out at a high level. We can put comments in here. This column represents where we are right now. For example, Building and Grounds has had 2 trucks this year. So my assumption is they're not going to need trucks for at least another 5 years. So that's kind of how that works. So this will be a real high level, and we'll provide this to you consolidated. So you can have that in front of you when you're looking at these capital things and you say, okay, we're going to spend a chunk of money here, but we know that these are coming up. So it just gives you a better picture. So I also wanted to, I know foregone's the F word, but I wanted to show this because my chief deputy Keith put this together for us, and I think it really shows how hard that this county works to save taxpayers money. So he looked back 10 years. This could have been further, but he just started 10 years. So in 2011, our foregone balance was 4.5 million, and as you can see, that foregone balance has grown all the way to now. Because it's cumulative, as of 2020, that's how much property tax that this county taxpayers have not paid, because that money has been sitting in foregone. 8 times the balance.
There you go.
So when people say that you're not working hard to help them with their taxes, you can show them that you've worked very hard to save them tax money. And I think it's an important message to keep things in perspective.
You're going back 3 boards.
Yeah.
Jay, Todd, Dan.
So also to put that in perspective, so if we would have just taken the 3% every year, our budget would be about 181 million instead of 101
Instead
million.
of 100 million.
So that's just a math thing, just for perspective purposes, kind of like this forecast worksheet. So any other starting items that you would like communicated to the groups before they embark on their budgets? What sorts of things do you want them to be thinking about when they're working on their budget?
Bill, any thoughts?
No, I think it's important people realize we were in a tough budget year last year, and it's going to be tougher this year. And please be lean, as lean as you can, and know that we will consider your requests carefully. But there's going to be no fat in this budget as far as I'm concerned.
Leslie?
I guess I would ask that when people are asking for new things to say, is this making my life easier, or can I not do my job without it? I mean, I think right now we're just gonna have to stick with, I cannot do my job unless I have this. So I don't really want to entertain things that are, hey, it would be really great to have this or that. I want to entertain things that are like, I cannot do my job without this.
Okay.
Agreed.
Both points make sense. We managed to keep everybody employed. We managed to provide some level of nominal increases. If we're going to keep everyone employed and provide some level of increase, something's got to give, and that's going to have to be in the B and C budgets. Can't have it both ways.
All right. I did make a note down here about COVID, and I know that we have addressed this in other meetings, but we will continue to have COVID costs. We don't know if those COVID costs will continue into 2022, but we will be monitoring how much post-COVID funding period costs we're seeing and keep you apprised of that during the budget process.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I had. If there's any questions or comments.
Leslie, any questions?
I suppose the other thing too is don't ask for 15 things and hoping to get 2. Just ask for the 2 that you really, really need. And then the travel as well. We don't know what travel's looking like. I know there's a huge number of population who's not going to get vaccinated, so their opportunities to fly might be curtailed, which don't get me going on that. So I would ask, as Dina's put down here, look at more distance learning opportunities instead of actually traveling out of state to learn these different things that help us provide service.
Okay, great.
Cool. Bill, do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I always have final thoughts. The thing that I agree wholeheartedly with Leslie, and I think we need to look at COVID. It forced us to take a real hard look at how we work, how we do business here at the county. And we've had a vast majority of employees who have really worked hard to keep the budget down, to not spend too much money, to not ask for things they don't need. And we just need to continue that this year and really work hard. I mean, it's a cooperative team effort, and that may sound corny, but that's what it is. And I think the commissioners all agree that we're going to keep a very close eye during this budget process on what's going on.
I suppose I would ask as well, if there's something that a department has that we've said no to right here today, talk to your liaison and just say, okay, look, you guys said no to this, but this is our circumstance, and what do you think about that? So just in case there's something that we've said, we're not going to entertain this, then come to your liaison and just say, hey, I know you said this, but I just want to let you know what my situation is.
I'm fine with everything just noted. I'm good.
Terrific.
I think the message is clear. Public comment. We're all part of the public, by the way. Prosecutor Barry McHugh, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Commissioners. A couple questions on new programs, tax-funded, self-funded. I presume that self-funded means that the program itself funds that project as opposed to I find money in my budget to fund a new program.
Correct. I would say restricted funds or it's fee-based, essentially, like the district court program is they're paying for themselves. They're paying for, I think, 2 bodies now, if I'm not mistaken, and, retrieving money for the county.
Okay. Second question is, I'm curious as to the amount of unspent funds from last fiscal year that were not returned, they just weren't spent, and whether we have an estimate as to what we might be looking at in this fiscal year, given COVID. There's been some restrictions, I think, on certain types of spending, like travel that was mentioned. So do we have the current number from last fiscal year and an estimate as to what we might be looking at in this fiscal year?
I think it's
Dina, do you have an idea?
So I don't have it right off the top of my head, but we will be doing our assigned fund balance resolution, where we'll look at what's sitting out there and how much we're going to allocate for 2-year or 2-month cushion, 3-month cushion, and then what's left in assigned fund balance. And then we'll be able to see what our excess cash is. So I can't tell you how much has been returned. Right now in our assigned fund balance, we have about 11 million.
But for last fiscal year, you don't have a number?
I don't have that.
I think typically, if memory serves correct, it's been a little bit around $1 million each year, except for last year because of the $500 bonuses. So I want to say that it's probably substantially under $1 million what was returned for 2020.
And I can look at we sent off
Fiscal
our
20.
preliminary CAFR, so I can get that number and send it out.
Thank you.
The other thing which could potentially add, I guess you could say funding, is that I think the legislature is also taking a hard look at the URDs. And I mentioned earlier that the rebates that would come back to us this year as a result of the closures would be about $3.5 million. But if you look at all taxing entities in Kootenai County, for the current fiscal year, we are contributing $12.5 million to the URDs. Countywide, all taxing districts, not just the county. And so if that gets reduced, theoretically, there'd be more money in our coffers. But at this point, it's premature. We don't know.
Right. And if it's capped, then it doesn't matter.
Well, that's true too. You're right. If it's capped, it doesn't matter, right? It just eases the burden on the taxpayer.
Yes,
Yeah.
which does matter.
Which does matter, right. Okay, anyone else? Public comment? None? 10:44, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, commissioners.